I'll be telling you, but we're doing this so that you can know where to go and look for them. You want to try talking now, Savannah?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear
Okay.
you.
I don't know what happened. I haven't had that happen before, so I'm really sorry. I hope that the audio clips, the other clips and things that I'll share with you will work, and we'll navigate through this. Okay, so thanks everybody. We're going to go ahead and officially get started. My name is Savannah Donovan. I'm the Environmental Public Program Coordinator at the Anita Purvis Nature Center, which is part of the Urbana Park District. And I'm joined by some friends tonight. Actually, I see lots of friends here, but I want to call out a couple people. First is Judy Miller. Judy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, folks. I work with Savannah at the Anita Purvis Nature Center, and I'm the Environmental Program Manager. And with me is my husband, Mike.
Thanks, Judy and Mike. And then also we have Roger Diggs joining us, and Roger's volunteering to help me out tonight. He's going to provide some perspective as a birder locally here, and he's also representing the Champaign County Audubon Society. You can say hello if you want, Roger.
Oh, hello.
Sorry.
No problem.
Roger is also one of the Park District's board commissioners.
Oops. All right, can you all still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. And can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, yep. Wonderful. Whoops. All right, I'm going to make sure I can see my chat as well. So if you want to participate in the chat, you're welcome to ask questions there live. I cannot see you all now that I'm sharing my screen, so Judy and Roger can sort of help to field questions if I don't notice that you're trying to get my attention or ask a question, but feel free to go ahead and ask questions as we go. And very excited to be able to lead this program on Zoom this evening. The Woodcock Walk every year is possibly one of my favorite programs that we do at the Park District. I am not an expert birder. I'm not an ornithologist, but I'm a naturalist with a lot of passion for local species, and particularly the woodcock, because it is just so amazing. So there is no woodcock walk in person. Right now at the Urbana Park District, we are still limiting our in-person programs. So what we're intending to do this evening is to give you a good idea about this bird species, where you can find it and when, so that you have all the tools you need to be able to go wherever you live locally and try to find the appropriate habitat to be able to see American woodcocks. Can you all see my chat box? I know Catherine said she could see it.
Yeah, it is in your in the screen. I can keep track of the
okay. I'll go ahead
if you want.
I'll go ahead and close it. Thanks, Judy. All right, so there's just a plug for the Champaign County Audubon Society here. That is their website at the bottom. It's easy to Google Champaign County Audubon Society, but we always thank them for their partnership in this program. So here is the bird that we are going to be talking about this evening, the American woodcock. Species name is Scolopax minor, and it is an acrobatic forest sandpiper. So if you are a birder, if you're interested in birds, you probably know that a sandpiper tends to be a shore species. This particular species of sandpiper lives inland here in the Midwest. It does also live along the East Coast. I'll show you a range map here in just a moment. This bird has a ton of aliases. So it's known as a timber doodle, a bog sucker, a sky dancer, a mud bat, mud snipe, Labrador twister, pop-eyed shot dodger, and many more. So I have a question for you all. Does anybody have any ideas about what these nicknames tell us about this bird. They all have clues about the bird's life history, things that it does or where it lives. So go ahead and shout it out or put it in the chat if you have any ideas about this bird based on its nicknames. How about timberdoodle? Where do you think it lives? Amongst the timber, right? It likes to live near forests. Bog sucker. This bird probes in wet ground to find its food, so it looks like it's sucking the mud. And of course, we'll see why it's called the sky dancer. Other names like Labrador twister and pop-eyed shot dodger, those are referencing this bird's history as a game species. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. So there is an American woodcock, roasted probably. Maybe it's raw, I don't know. But this is the bird without feathers, it's ready to eat. Now, historically in the United States, this bird has been hunted for a long time. And when Europeans came to the United States, they saw the American woodcock and they were like, hey, we have a European woodcock back home that we love to eat. Part of the reason people enjoy hunting this bird is because they do have sort of an erratic flight. And so they're a little bit challenging to shoot, I believe. They're also kind of out in the evening time. So here's their distribution map. You'll see that they are living just on the eastern half of the United States. And up in Illinois, where we are, this is the breeding resident zone. So they are coming up here during the breeding season. In the pink, in the middle here, actually it's sort of the southern United States, that's where they're permanent residents. So it's warm enough in the south that they don't need to migrate to be able to find food. But once you get too far north, it gets cold here in the winter and they're no longer able to find their appropriate food. So here's a picture of the bird. You'll notice its long bill, its interesting kind of shape and patterns. They have a very large eye. And that's because this bird is crepuscular, or it's almost nocturnal. Crepuscular means that it's not out during the middle of the day. It's more active in the early morning and the late evening when there's not much light. So like nocturnal animals, this bird has a really big eye. Its body is about the same size as a robin. So it weighs about 4 to 11 ounces, about 11 inches long, and a wingspan of about 18 inches. It looks bigger than a robin when you see it though, because they're kind of chunky, and then that long beak also makes them look quite a bit bigger. So as far as the shape of this bird, they have almost no visible neck and pretty short legs. And so they look kind of pear-shaped. Their coloration is meant to blend in with the forest floor. So I'll show you a couple of pictures of how well camouflaged they can be. That one's okay. How about this one? The woodcock is pretty hard to see in this picture. The easiest thing I think is to find the eye, the round eye, and then you might notice the stripes on its head. So there's the woodcock. And this is what they're doing during the middle of the day often. They're just kind of nestled down in the leaves on the ground. Sometimes they might be incubating eggs while they're laying there. So if you're hiking off trail, this is a time of year where you want to be careful not to step on woodcocks. They'll kind of flesh out from under you at the last minute. Now the eyes of the woodcock are very interesting because they're so big and they're up so high on the bird's head. Now in this first picture here, we're looking down on the woodcock from above, and the woodcock is looking right back up at us. So their eyes, the placement of their eyes high and wide on their head, it allows them to see above them and behind them very well. They actually can see better behind them than they can in front of them. They have better binocular vision to the rear than to the front. And then here in this second picture, you can see, this is the back of the woodcock, but it's like they have eyes in the back of their head, right? And when you consider how this bird spends its time with its nose or its bill probed into the ground, it makes sense that its eyes need to be high up on its head, because that's how it's able to watch out for predators. This species has almost no natural defenses. So their defense mechanism against predation is just camouflage and fly away. They can't really protect themselves. So they're always on the lookout for predators while they're feeding. Now, this position of the eye kind of changed slowly in the course of this species throughout thousands of years. And as the eyes started migrating higher in the skull, the placement of the ear, can you see where this arrow is pointing? The ear is between the eye and the nose. So there was kind of some rearranging of anatomical features. And as a result, even essentially the brain of this bird was sort of flipped upside down. So if you look at the brain of a woodcock, its different parts of the brain are upside down compared to other types of birds. And that's really all related to its feeding behavior so that it can watch for predators. So there's that typical feeding behavior, probing their bill into the mud. And this is evidence of mud probing. So there's no woodcocks in this photo here, but this is what you might see in good woodcock habitat when you're out looking for them. You might see little tracks. You can barely see tracks in this picture, but they're going to leave little sets of 3 bird toes on the ground, and then all of these holes are where they're probing for food. Easier to see in the snow. Now you can get a good look at their adorable little tracks. They've got 3 big toes in the front and sort of a little hind toe in the back there. So this snow on the ground in this picture sort of brings up a good point about, when we see woodcock. Well, they're never going to want to migrate back north too early in the season, because if the ground is still frozen, they're not going to be able to probe for food. Probing in the ground is really their only mechanism of capturing food. They have a really unique beak. If you can zoom in on this, you might notice there are little tiny, these are like teeth, but of course they're not. Birds have beaks, but they're like little ridges. And the tip of this bill can actually open independently of the rest of the bill. So it functions like a very effective pair of tweezers. Also, there are nerves all along this bill. It's very sensitive. So when they put it into the ground, they can feel where earthworms and other invertebrates are, and they can pinch them with just the tip of their bill to pull them out and eat them. So I want to share some videos with you. Since we can't be together in person, it's kind of fun to be able to take a look at some videos together. So we'll wait just a second as this loads. Here we go. Is the sound working for everyone? Can you hear it too? That's our funky woodcock dance. All right, so this is not, this little behavior that you see this bird doing, I'll play it again in a moment. This is not the mating dance that people often think it is. We talk about this bird having this amazing mating ritual and mating dance. This isn't it. This is a feeding behavior. I'm going to play it again, and I want you to watch what the woodcock is doing with its feet and with its body as it moves. Okay. I just think that's the cutest thing ever. So this little woodcock here is tapping on the ground with its feet in order to kind of rustle up worms and other invertebrates underground. Somebody explained it to me like this once. Have you noticed when it rains, the earthworms come out, right? Someone explained to me that they're little footsteps of the woodcock on the ground, and the way that they're kind of stepping on the ground, they're putting vibrations down into the earth, and they are maybe mimicking the pitter patter of raindrops on the ground. Either way, when they send these vibrations through their feet into the ground, it rustles up the earthworms, and they're able to, I don't know, feed better that way. So it's actually gets the earthworms moving and allows the woodcock to be able to locate them and pull them out. I think that's amazing. I just recently heard of another animal that does something similar, but now I can't remember what species it was. So if you've heard a similar story to that, call it out. So the diet, oh, did somebody want to say something? Sorry. All right. So the diet of the woodcock is about 90% earthworms, and they can eat more than their own weight in earthworms in a single day. The other 10% of their diet is insects, larvae, millipedes, centipedes, spiders. So it's pretty much all invertebrates that they can find in the ground. What type of habitat do these little critters live in? They actually want a very specific type of edge habitat, or like a mixed habitat zone. So there are 4 types of habitats shown on this. This is almost like a forest succession picture here, where we've got mature forest on the very far right. And actually, that is not frequently used by woodcocks. They are typically using the younger growth forest because it gets a little bit more light to the ground. They like a brushy sort of understory habitat for feeding. And then they want an open area like abandoned farmland, prairie, meadow as their singing ground. So this is what you want to look for wherever you live. If you want to go and see woodcocks, you want sort of a transition from an open area, it could even be mowed grass, to an area with some good, 15 to 30-year tree growth. So here's a couple photos, examples here. So in the photo on the right, you see a nice kind of open meadow. There's some brushy habitat, and you see some trees in the background as well. Okay, so we're going to see some videos and audio next about their courtship ritual, the mating ritual. So this is one of the reasons why people are most interested in woodcocks. It's for this aerial display that they give during the mating season. So right now it's early March, and honestly, we expect the woodcocks to start arriving to Champaign County any day, really any time now. And then as soon as they're here, they start their process of the mating rituals. And so really, I mean, any time in the next week or so, we might start to hear and see the woodcocks.
Actually, Savannah, I heard from a birder out by Homer Lake, and they had one last night. So
Excellent.
Yeah, so they're here. They're just not very much here yet.
Okay. So they are in Champaign County. That's wonderful. So they display in an open area, like I mentioned, and this is just the males displaying. The females are usually just right along the sidelines there. And the display starts with the male singing a nasal peent sound about every 5 seconds. So see if we can link. Can you hear the sound?
Yeah, it's fine.
So that's the peent sound. Um, there's hardly ever good video of the woodcocks doing this because if you remember earlier, I said they're doing these displays just before dawn and just after dusk. So any of the videos I'm going to share with you this evening, they're not great. They're not easy to see, but honestly that's really reminiscent of what we would see if we were actually out in Meadowbrook Park together. You know, it would be a little bit difficult to see them. It would look about like this. I'm going to play the peent sound just one more time. Does that sound sound like any other species of bird that you've heard before?
Nighthawk.
I think so too. Yeah, I think it also sounds like a nighthawk. Nighthawks, when they make that noise, they are doing like a little bit of echolocation. But that's not, I don't believe that's what the woodcocks are doing. I think that's just like genuinely their voice. So that's the first part.
And usually with the nighthawks, they're flying when they're making that sound. So
Yeah.
that might help you identify what you're trying to locate because the woodcock's going to be on the ground making that noise and the nighthawk's going to be up in the air.
Yeah, pro tip, Judy. Thank you. Absolutely. If you hear that sound coming from above you, that's probably a nighthawk. And you can recognize them, you know, they're flying at about the same evening hours as the woodcock might be. But a nighthawk, it looks almost black with white wing bars underneath it. And the woodcock, they're not making that vocalization sound when they're flying. The peep sound is sort of like the broadcasting to like, hey ladies, I'm about to show you my stuff. I'm about to show you like what a great flyer I am. Everybody look at me. So that's what the peep sound means. Now this is a really nice illustration here. It starts on the ground. Sorry if you can see all this extra stuff that's popping up on my screen. They start on the ground and they spiral up into the air. Now, this bird typically only migrates at about 50 feet off the ground. It's a very low flying migrating bird. But when they do this display, they're flying 200 to 300 feet in the air. So they will spiral up so high that you can't even see them because it's dark. And you pretty much almost lose sight of them. And when they get to the peak of this 200 to 300 feet, then they sort of reverse and they start to zigzag and cascade back down, sort of like a falling leaf coming back down to the earth. And they land at just about the same location where they started. So big spiral up and then coming back down. Now, that's what the display looks like visually. But really, as I've started to understand more about this bird, I don't think it's the visual display that the females are looking for at all. It's an auditory display because as the bird circles up and as it falls back down, its wings are making their own sound. So this bird's first three primary feathers are these rigid feathers called twitter feathers. And you maybe have noticed before a mourning dove. If you flush a mourning dove or, it just flies away from in front of you, you hear this sound like as they fly away. That's not their vocalization. That's their feathers making that sound. Same thing with the American woodcock. So these twitter feathers are literally making a whistling sound as the air moves through them and vibrates the feathers. Okay, so now we're going to listen to kind of the full auditory performance here.
American Woodcock.
So of course, this is the bird on the ground making the painting sound. Now it's taken off. It's circling up and up and up. Now there's an additional sound, a chirping sound. So as the bird starts to come back down, you're going to hear both a chirping vocalization and the twitter feathers. And then it's back on the ground and it's painting again. That final sound that played in this clip, that's just one flushing away, and it's twitter feathers vibrating. Does anybody want me to play that again? Maybe I'll move on to this clip, and if we need to come back to it's such a nice sound clip, I think. It gives you really exactly what you're listening for when you go out. And this is probably my favorite YouTube clip that I'm about to share with you, video clip, because it does a really good job of giving you kind of the real experience of what it's like to be out there. So give us a second here. I've got a lot of tabs open to make sure it works well for you. So I'm going to make this full screen. And again, it's going to be hard to see. I apologize for that. So you might see a little black dot. That's the bird. And maybe you get just a glimpse of it as it's tumbling back down. So there's the bird just above the cursor there. And then it takes off again. So it just repeats this process, spiraling up and falling back down. That's the courtship display. Now, if there's a female on the sidelines and she likes what she hears, maybe she likes what she sees too, then she might approach the male. Copulation is really a quick thing though, and the males are not involved in the care of the young. So pretty much what we're seeing this evening, that's kind of the extent of the male's skills, impressive skills, is this aerial and auditory display. So I love this picture. This is from a New York City Audubon Woodcock expedition. And since we're not all there together tonight, I mean, that video I just showed you and this picture here really sums up the feeling, I think, of an in-person woodcock walk. So it's dark and everybody's looking like, where is it? I don't see it. Oh, wait, there it is. Here it comes. And then, it kind of shows up in front of you again. So if you don't have great night vision, or if you don't have great distance vision, just be prepared to be realistic with yourself about what you're going to, maybe be able to see and hear.
Savannah, before you move on, oftentimes, I don't know if you were going to mention this, the woodcock, when it takes off, when it lands pretty close, if not exactly to where it took off.
Right.
So once you've seen a few, if you just stay where you are, you're going to keep seeing them throughout that time frame.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if you can find it on the ground, it's okay if you lose it in the sky because it's probably going to land just about right back where it was, unless you're getting too close and you're disturbing it. So Roger and I will talk a little bit more about, kind of etiquette when you're woodcock watching. We'll give you some more tips before we depart here tonight. Now, I forgot my copy of a Sand County Almanac at work today, so I'm not able to read to you the excerpt about the sky dance written by Aldo Leopold, but I suspect some of you have read it before. If you haven't, it is just the most beautiful description of the whole thing of, where to go and when, what to expect to see and hear. And Aldo Leopold ends this excerpt with this quote. He says, "The drama of the sky dance is enacted nightly on hundreds of farms, the owners of which sigh for entertainment but harbor the illusion that it is to be sought in theaters. They live on the land, but not by the land." I mean, this is basically Aldo Leopold reminding us that there is such, incredible beauty in nature, and there is so much to see and appreciate and be entertained by in nature. So that's what we're doing this evening, is encouraging you to go out and find these guys for yourselves. Now, I mentioned copulation is quick, and the mother is pretty much doing all of, everything for the little ones. From that point on, they nest directly on the ground. So this is another good reason not to be stomping around off trail during woodcock nesting season. The female will lay 1 egg a day until she completes her clutch of 4. So normally they're just going to have 1 clutch of 4. And then they begin incubating them usually after they've laid all 4 eggs. If she loses her clutch, like to predators, so, imagine the kinds of predators that they're going to have to watch out for nesting on the ground. So like snakes, raccoons, possums, even, people stomping around outside that could be a potential detriment to their nest. You can see the nest is just a tiny depression with a couple leaves on it. So they're relying just on camouflage mostly to be able to stay safe. So if the female loses her clutch, she may nest again, but only lay 3 eggs the next time. So these birds are not big producers. Like they don't have a lot of babies in a year. And so that's one of the reasons why the woodcock populations are starting to decline. You'll see that the eggs are kind of a glossy buff color with dark speckles. They're about 1.5 inches, which is sort of large for a bird of this size. If you remember earlier, I compared the size to that of a robin, but a robin's eggs are only about 1.1 inches. So this has, almost a 1/2 inch on a robin egg. There is the mother with her young. This is a sort of a difficult picture to see, but if you thought the adult was well camouflaged, the babies they can like just disappear. I'll show you a couple more pictures of the babies. There's a clutch of 4 babies here. There's a nice high resolution image of one of the young ones. So the eggs incubate for about 3 weeks, not too long. These chicks, once they're born, they can start probing their bills into the ground within hours of being hatched. They'll start to fly in about 2 weeks, and they're nearly adults after about 1 month. The family unit of the mother and her young ones, they'll stay together for about 6 to 8 weeks. So that's pretty fast. They grow up quickly and then they're on their own. The average life expectancy is usually under 2 years for the woodcock, but that's not because they don't live long. It's because they've got kind of a hard life and a lot of barriers and obstacles. But I believe that I read on the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's All About Birds website that the oldest recorded woodcock was like 11 years old. So It's really difficult for scientists to be able to give very accurate numbers as far as, people always ask, how long do they live? Well, an animal in the wild, encounters predation, disease, accidents, whereas an animal in captivity can sometimes live longer as long as it can be cared for well. Um, when you're trying to figure out how old a species can live, you have to be able to capture it and then recapture it and measure the time in between, right? So in order for someone to know that a woodcock lived for 11 years in the wild, they would have had to, tag it, ID it, and then recapture it or find it, after that period of time. It's not always easy to say, how long does an animal live? But woodcocks, under 2 years, that is kind of a pretty short average lifespan. So some of the challenges that woodcocks face, late season snow and freezing is one. And so imagine that we have, all of our woodcocks return by the second week in March, and then we have a late season hard freeze. If it's frozen for, more than a couple days, these birds they're going to starve. They're not going to have access to food if they can't probe into the ground. So climate change is making weather unpredictable, and it's resulting in a greater number of these late season freezes. And so that is one thing that is a challenge to these birds. Another is obstacles to flight. So I mentioned that when they migrate, they are migrating pretty low to the ground at only about 50 feet. And when they do that, they will tend to migrate in low light, like during the evening and nighttime. And they can run into utility lines, cell towers, cars on highways, buildings and houses. Remember also, they don't see as good in front of them as they do above and behind them. So they're more likely to run into things, I think, than other types of birds. And like all species, habitat loss is probably the number one reason why woodcocks are in decline. This is still a bird that has a hunting season. In areas where there are enough, there will be I think it's typically in the fall, but, of course, it depends state to state where you live, what the woodcock population is like. But there are in some states, hunting seasons for the woodcock. So how can you help them? Well, you can plant native plants and habitat. You can turn off your lights at night. So that's not one that everybody thinks of, but if there are lights on inside a building, a bird is not going to recognize the window there, and they can run right into the window. And then controlled burns like prairie burns, forest burns, those help to keep out invasive species and keep the habitat healthy and optimal for woodcocks to be able to nest and feed. So where to see them? Well, this is a map of Meadowbrook Park. So for anybody here who is in the Urbana area, Meadowbrook Park is on the corner of East Windsor Road, and then this is South Race Street here. Meadowbrook Park has 2 parking lots. It has the parking lot on Windsor at the Prairie Play Pavilion, and then it has a parking lot down here just to the south of Clark. This is Clark Lindsay Village on the corner. So just to the south here, there's a parking lot by the Organic Gardens. You could park at either parking lot because where you want to go is kind of in the middle of the park here, where this yellow circle is. This habitat, so if we were able to zoom in on this, you might be able to tell there's nice trees here, trees along the water here, and then open area. So it's just that type of habitat that we were talking about earlier. Now, I'm going to pause for a second and let Roger talk about his experience at Meadowbrook Park, where he tends to see them, and where else he's seen them in the area.
That is the prime spot to see them. But when when the park literally becomes full of displaying woodcocks, usually about mid-March, sometimes a little earlier, and you can hear them virtually anywhere, from the meadow that's up to the north. They all the way down to the southern boundary, and all the way almost to the western boundary as well. But they really like that spot where the
Uh-oh, Roger, you muted yourself, I think.
did on purpose because my phone.
Oh, sorry.
It was a spam call. Thank you very much. But yeah, that's a real good spot. My understanding is that you can also hear them at the Perkins Road site, which is in the northeast part of town. I've wondered if they could be heard at Weaver Park, which is a little further south. A number of our forest preserves are good spots. Buffalo Trace, which is across Route 47 from Lake of the Woods. If you go in there about about a half a mile, we nearly got hit by one. Well, didn't we have that happen to us, Savannah, a couple of years ago on a walk where it came like right over a whole line of people, and you said that's why we have you sign a waiver?
Yeah, that sounds like one of my jokes, Roger.
Yeah,
It's happened to me a lot that we flushed them and they're just right there, or they're coming in for a landing and they're just right there.
A good time to see them really at Meadowbrook is when they are retiring for the day. The last few minutes before it gets fairly light, they will do a real flat flight, sometimes several hundred yards, when they're looking for wherever they're going to spend the night. And they don't care where you are. They'll fly right in front of your nose and you get great looks, but that's about a 5-minute window. But anywhere where there's woods and brush and open grassland, they may be there.
Mm-hmm. I've been surprised at some of the, like I told you, Roger, I've seen them at Loman Park in Urbana because my husband plays disc golf out there. I was so surprised to see them there. I mean, that school shares, what is it, Thomas Paine Elementary?
Yep.
It kind of shares some area with Thomas Paine, and I just did not expect that to be the place, like a schoolyard, disc golf course habitat. I did not expect to see woodcocks there, and there were a bunch there one year. So I mean, now at this point, I'm kind of like, I think they're just going to go wherever they can find habitat left that's appropriate for them.
Somebody had asked about seeing them in Crystal Lake Park and Busey Woods. We do see them in Busey Woods. It's usually just before you step on them, they take off. And then somebody said they saw one when they were getting the prairie going on Broadway Avenue right next to the Nature Center. Generally, when we're doing a prairie fire, we will try to walk through the prairie to kind of flush out wildlife so that they don't get trapped in it. But they are found along the ponds in Busey Woods because it's nice and wet and muddy, and there's lots of earthworms there.
Yeah, they're bog suckers, right? I like that kind of muddy habitat.
Somebody asked about Weaver Park, and I haven't heard if there are any at Weaver Park. It should be good habitat, but I don't think there are many birders out there that time of
Night.
Of evening or morning, because usually they're going to the wetland there, and those birds generally retire earlier.
Yeah, our park district natural areas coordinator wrote me back about Weaver Park, and he said that in 10 years, he's only seen woodcocks there twice. But if you're out and about, it's worth trying out some of these places in the evening. So what you want to do is they're displaying kind of on a sliding time scale, and it's dependent on the sun. So they will display just before sunrise and just after sunset. I think only Roger's getting up before sunrise to listen for woodcocks. Those diehard birders, but most people are looking for them in the evenings just after sunset. And literally, I mean, you're going to go online or on your weather app, and check when is the sunset today and position yourself at, this is in this picture here, this is the hard path on Meadowbrook. You don't have to be off in the soft paths at Meadowbrook Park. You can kind of be standing near the hard path and just right at sunset, kind of station yourself near there and just start listening for that painting sound. And you'll hear the direction to go where the males are calling. One note though is that our park district parks, Busey Woods, Meadowbrook Park, all of those, they do close at dark. So, typically we say they're open from sunrise to sunset, but at the same time, I'm telling you, you have to see this bird right after sunset. So just be cognizant that we don't want you to be out there, in the middle of the night. We don't want you to be out there when it's really dark. So, and the woodcock will stop displaying as soon as it's pretty dark too. So, there's a window of about 15 to 30 good minutes in there. And, you're not going to get in trouble if you're out at Meadowbrook Park at sunset looking for these guys. But, we do want you and everybody else to be safe and follow the rules and leave as soon as you can after they're done. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to stop sharing for a minute, in just a minute, so I can see all of your faces. But if you don't,
Diana,
yes,
somebody's asking if they make the sound during the day at all, and it is only the males that vocalize, correct?
yes, it's only the males that vocalize. I think the females also have Twitter feathers, but they're not doing this aerial display. So the females are not going to be making, their Twitter feathers would never make the same sounds as the males. But no, the females are not painting, and I've never heard a male paint outside of that time period before dawn or just after dusk.
Yeah, I haven't either. Usually, I mean, sometimes it might be a little bit earlier, but they're usually done by then, once the sun's fully up in the morning.
If you want some great information, All About Birds is wonderful. And I find that if I am searching questions about birds, this site comes up a lot because I think they just have a lot of great information and they're a wonderful resource. So with that, thank you to Roger from the Audubon Society. Thank you to Judy from the Nature Center for being here tonight. I am going to stop sharing my screen, and then if you all have any other questions or discussion or anything, be happy to chat. One last thing I want to do is share with you a link to a survey, and I would just love it if you would take a moment to fill out a survey about this program and what you thought about it. Give me just a second and I'll put that in the chat. But go ahead and speak out questions if you like. So there's the link to the online survey. It's just a short form, asking how you heard about the program, where you're visiting from, that kind of information, so we can do even better in the future. I'm looking now for any other questions here.
Oh, you were going to, Savannah, you were going to talk about etiquette of hiking, looking for them.
Yeah, I mean, like I mentioned before, we want to stay on the trails because we don't want to step on them or their habitat. During COVID, it's important that, we're asking people to still wear masks in the park, especially if you might be around other people in the park. So there are going to be others, out there hiking. We just want to make sure that you're staying socially distanced from them. If they're people who are not in your group, and, even outside, if we're going to be close to other people observing birds, please wear a mask outside. Roger, was there any other kind of etiquette tips that you have?
Yeah. You're silent still, Roger.
Oh,
One of the things that I've noticed with groups is that if there are kids in the group, you're like a big tree to them. And sometimes it's difficult for them to be able to see because the adults all want to be up there. But make sure you get the little ones up close. The other thing I noticed in your picture was that one woman was using binoculars. You can bring binoculars, but they're virtually useless because you can't. I mean, it's hard enough to see them with your eyes. To focus on them with a pair of binoculars is just impossible. Some people can photograph them. I could never do that. But I think and also to be silent. If you have a leader, Savannah is a great leader. But if you have a leader, let that leader do the talking and don't chit chat or whatever, because that sometimes the paints are hard to pick up at first, and the Twitters are sometimes hard to pick up at first as well. And it's just such a fabulous experience that you don't want people to miss it.
We also dress for the weather. Layers are best, and make sure you wear footwear that can, especially if you're going to be walking on any of the soft trails. Meadowbrook gets pretty wet. That's where the woodcocks like to be, right along the creek line there, and the tree lines where it can be pretty muddy. So make sure you dress so that you're comfortable. And when I've hiked out there, I sometimes bring a little hiking stool and sit down for a bit and just enjoy the evening as they're preparing for their song. I also want to do a little plug for the Champaign County Audubon Sunday's bird walks that they're started this March. Again, we had to cancel them last year during the beginning of COVID, but they are meeting in the parking lot at Crystal Lake Park or at the Nature Center at 7:30 in the morning. You might find a woodcock at that time of day, at least by rustling it up as we're hiking by. But if you are interested in sharing and moving along with socially distancing with other birders and learning more about the birds as they migrate through as spring comes, I strongly encourage to join them on Sunday mornings, and they'll be doing that through Labor Day weekend. Not Labor Day, Memorial Day weekend.
We have delayed it this spring. Our first walk will not be until the 28th, Sunday morning, the 28th, from 7:30 to 9. We also have a limit of 10. So go to the website, and it doesn't mean we'll only have 10. It means that any group will only be 10, and we'll just, if we get more, we'll divvy up leaders. We've got some really great birders in the group, and we'll divvy up leaders and go in a group. But if you've ever been in a birding group, you know it's really hard to maintain social distance. So it's kind of like herding cats. So 10 is a big group.
yeah. So I've put in the chat the links for champaignCountyAudubon.org, and then they also have an events page, so you can check that out. There's going to be the most up-to-date information there. Or I think most of you might have heard about this program through Facebook. Follow the Champaign County Audubon Society and the Anita Purvis Nature Center on Facebook to find more. Lastly, Catherine asked a great question about using lights, and I'm glad you reminded me to mention this, Catherine, because it is low light, and if you want to bring a flashlight for yourself so you can see the trail, you can see where you're walking on your way back to the car, totally understandable. But you probably don't want to shine that flashlight at the woodcocks. They're doing their thing. They like it to be dark. They don't want to be exposed. Red light, however, is more appropriate to use if you're going to try to be highlighting like a nocturnal species. So in the last few years, I have started using a red spotlight during nighttime programs I'll shine it on, an owl or some other nocturnal animal that I see, but I still try not to use it for very long. So I might use it to show everybody this is where the animal is. Red light doesn't hurt their night vision as much. It doesn't disturb them as much. And we can still see them. So red light is better if you need to use a light, but I would still not, do it for long. Just as short as you can. Take a look at it and then leave it be. Great questions, everyone. You should have my email address, but if you don't, I'll put it in the chat here. You can always follow up with any questions. I hope to see you at another program in the future. Like I said, follow us, check us out. And thank you everybody for coming this evening.